Welcome back to the I Don't Want a Divorce podcast with Dr. David E. Clarke. That's me. I finished my series based on my divorce recovery book, I Didn't Want a Divorce, Now What? And if you missed that, then of course you can go back and listen to those podcasts. And now I'm doing a series of podcasts based on your responses to my recent contest, which has just come to a close. I asked you to complete this statement. I stayed with my abusive spouse because fill in the blank. We received a ton of great responses. Real, honest, open, and frankly heartbreaking. Thank you. I'll go over the 15 winning responses in this podcast and the next 2 podcasts. We're going to do 5 in each podcast because I have to have time for my responses. I'm going to read some selections from the emails I received from you. And we got so many terrific responses, I'll spend an additional 3 podcasts after these 3 sharing the honorable mentions. I think it's going to help a lot of people. If you are in an abusive relationship, married or living together or dating, or you know someone who is, then this series of podcasts are for you. I got responses from men as well as women. Now, if you are still with your abuser, get my book, Enough is Enough, How to Leave an Abusive Relationship. In fact, many that have even left their abuser in the process of divorce or divorced find this book helpful because it confirms they did the right thing. But if you're currently in an abusive relationship, this is the book for you. Enough is Enough. If you are separated or divorced from your abuser, again, it might be a 1-2 punch. You might want to get the Enough is Enough if you haven't read it. And also, I Didn't Want a Divorce, Now What? This is healing from what happened and moving on in your life. You'll find these 2 books and all my resources for marital crisis at davideclarkephd.com. That's Clarke with an A, davideclarkephd.com. If you want to talk to me about your situation, and many people are doing that using my phone advice service, that's explained on my website, again, davideclarkephd.com, 45 minutes. It's $200. It's the same price I charge for here in my office. You see the blue couch? Same price. Even in one session, I do 1, maybe 2 sessions with most people, you're going to get a clear, practical plan of action, a biblical plan for your crisis. Now, here's a note of interest I think you'll like. Many of your contest responses will find their way into my next book, which I'm working on even as we speak, which will be on Christian codependency, why women and even men are unable to leave their abusers. I've got the book on exactly why you can leave and how to leave, but there are many people that still feel stuck. That's because of codependency, so I'm going to fix that in this next book the best way that I can. It'll be released next year, probably April, May, hopefully before June of 2022. Self-published and available only on my website. You know what? Who needs publishers? I'm tired of publishers telling me what to write. This is a self-published operation. Not that I'm a control freak. Now, here are the first 5 winning responses to my contest. I'll give the response, all right, the winning response. I'm going to read portions of some emails in that category, and then I'll make my edgy, helpful comments. Okay, first one. I stayed with my abusive spouse because I need the abuser's financial support and can't make it on my own. Here's a few portions from some emails about this financial support reason. And it's a real thing. No question about that. Here's a lady. I stay with my abusive spouse because I will still have to care for my adult child. And this adult child has a physical disability. Okay, that's a real issue. She has to be able to care for that child. Yeah, I get that. I stay with my abusive spouse because I was financially dependent on him, which is often the case, and he threatened to leave me high and dry with nothing. Yeah, dirtball. You know he threatened that. I didn't know how to provide financially, another lady says. 6 homeschooled children without any family or cohesive community around me to help. Yeah, I get it. I cannot provide for myself financially. I'm frightened of not having health care or being able to afford my meds. Okay, you know what? I get it. Here's my response. You can't make it yet financially, all right? Yet. You're going to be able to. You've got to believe that. This is America still. You will be able to support yourself and your kids in time. You can get education, you can get training, you can get a decent job. It may take a while, it may take 1 or 2 years. I've had ladies in these situations, it took them 2 to 3 years to get ready to leave their abuser, to be able to support themselves financially, even with what they were going to get if there was a divorce. Okay, take the time. You don't leave until you're ready. God can provide financial support through your church, family, and friends. Yes, he can. Just before you leave, you will take half the money. You're going to have to find an attorney. It doesn't have to be a high-priced one. There's legal aid. You check out the county and state resources at your disposal, local resources. Maybe you can find a Christian attorney that will do it for a greatly reduced fee, but you're going to figure out what you can get in terms of temporary support or even in a divorce. You can do that. Again, your attorney will take legal steps to force your abuser to provide financial support. So don't let this reason stop you from leaving. Okay. Second winning response. I stayed with my abusive spouse because I was scared of the divorce process. Oh yeah, I hear that. Believe me. This one lady talked about being scared of federal agent/court connections. Oh man, I've had plenty of cases like this. A spouse, especially a man, in law enforcement, an abuser in law enforcement, past or present, has a huge advantage in court. Now that's true. Again, you still need to leave, but this is a problem. Another lady was talking about how this guy had zero involvement in our kids, during the marriage, but once I left him, he used the kids as a tool to manipulate and hurt me. Here's a guy that just used the system against her. He would tell me he wasn't bringing them back and they would not return them on time. Well, that's what attorney's for. I would wait at the police station for hours not knowing if I was going to see my kids again. He would take them and pawn them off on whoever to take care of. Yeah, these are stories I've heard over and over again. Here's what I want you to understand. The divorce process is awful. There's no question. Being married to an abuser is awful. Divorcing one is also awful. Or if he divorces you, it's brutal. It's a nightmare. That's true. The abuser will do all he can to punish you, destroy you emotionally and financially, to win at all costs. He'll manipulate the legal system. He'll hire a sleazeball attorney. They're all the same. The abuser will try to get custody, not because he loves the kids, could care less about the kids, but because he wants to damage you and humiliate you and break your heart and win. Listen to me, the only thing worse than the divorce process is staying with your abuser. You've got to believe that. You think it will hurt more to leave. Not true. It will hurt more to stay. His abusive behavior in the divorce process will simply confirm, even though it's awful, that you're doing the right thing by divorcing him. Okay, third winning response. I stayed with my abusive spouse because I didn't want to disappoint God. Oh boy, it was a very popular response in my contest. I hear you. I didn't want to disappoint God, this one lady says, and I should have left sooner. Oh, I've heard that a million times. I should have left sooner. I know. It's okay. This lady says, I tried to get my value through my spouse instead of God. I didn't want to disappoint God. Yep. This lady says, if I decided to divorce him, God would be displeased with me and I wouldn't be serving God any longer. That's what she thought. That's simply not true, but she thought that. And you can understand thinking that. Listen to this. You will disappoint God if you stay with your abuser. Now, he still loves you. That never changes. And he'll let you stay, but you'll disappoint him by staying. He loves you. He loves your kids, and he does not want you to stay and be destroyed. What kind of a God would that be if he wanted you to stay and be destroyed? It's not the God of the Bible. God will be happy and content when you leave your abuser. If you left a decent, loving husband or wife for no biblical reason, you would disappoint God. Of course, that would be no question about that. You're not doing that. You are leaving a dirt ball who has already destroyed your marriage and is busily engaged in destroying you and your children. And by the way, most of the time I talk about the man being the abuser. It can just as easily be the wife who is the abusive spouse. Please keep that in mind. There are dirt ball S's too, believe me. Okay, winning response number 4 in the contest. I stayed with my abusive spouse because I didn't want a divorce. Well, that's well said. I know you don't. I'll read a few excerpts from some emails. Because this would have been my 4th divorce. He was a Christian man, so he must be good. Yeah, boy, if only. Not so much. I stayed with my abusive spouse, another lady says, because I made the commitment to love him and created a family with him, which I desperately wanted to succeed. My comment here is you made a commitment, but your abuser made no commitment to you. And God knows that. This lady stayed because of the embarrassment of going through another divorce. I was married once before. You see, you don't want a divorce. Even if it's your first marriage, you don't want a divorce. If you've been married once or twice before, 3 times, divorce is the last thing you want. I know that. God knows that. I know you are desperate to make your marriage work. You take your vows seriously. Your abuser doesn't. He has vows to himself and nobody else, including God. This could be your first marriage. It could be your second, third, or fourth marriage. I know you dread being divorced. No matter what number marriage this is, God doesn't want you to continue suffering. He does not. Not when I read the Bible. God is not going to say, you got married and now you're stuck with this abuser. Too bad. Now, some Christian counselors will tell you that. Some pastors who are clueless will tell you that. Some friends that are idiots will tell you that. That's not what God says. Of course, he doesn't say that. Is that going to make you suffer? You made your decision, now you suffer? No. It's okay. In fact, it's the right and biblical thing to do to get away from your abuser. Don't spend hours and with seminars and all kinds of books understanding your abuser. Who cares? He's abusing you. Get away from him. Let him figure that stuff out in therapy if he wants to. God cares about you more than he cares about your abusive marriage. A lot more. In fact, he doesn't care about your abusive marriage at all. He's fine with that ending. Unless the abuser changes and wins you back, God doesn't want you in that marriage. Now, you would do anything to avoid divorce. I know that. In fact, you have done everything to avoid it. The ladies I talk to and even the men who are married to abusive spouses have tried for years, not weeks or months, years to change that person, to somehow make the marriage better. All failed because abusers don't change, at least when you stay with them. The more you try, the more your abuser resists and keeps on abusing you. The divorce will be his fault, not yours. Okay, we'll close out this podcast with the 5th winning response. I stayed with my abusive spouse because I didn't think it was abuse. Oh boy, that's a classic one. This will certainly make it into my book on Christian codependency. In fact, I think all these are going to. Listen to some of these excerpts from emails you sent me. I stayed with my abusive spouse because well-meaning friends told me his behavior wasn't abusive. I'd say get smarter friends. If he didn't hit me or rough me up, then it wasn't abuse. This is classic Christian ease, Christian community, guidelines and advice. Classic. If he's not beating you up, it's not abuse. She was also told men are just not empathetic. God didn't make them that way, and it would be wrong for me to have expectations that were too great. Are you kidding me? You know what God's expectation for husbands is? Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's the expectation. It is fine to have a super high expectation for your husband. God does. Friends say it's not abuse. Family may say it's not abuse. Your pastor says it's not abuse. What they do is redefine abuse. They minimize it to give the abuser a break. No one has the guts to speak the truth to him or her, the abusive spouse. Often, you grow up in a home where dad abused mom, so it's very familiar to you. This is how men treat women. That's what you learned. Mom took it and took it and took it and did nothing, and you thought, well, that's how it works. That's not how it's supposed to work. Again, read my book, Enough is Enough, How to Leave an Abusive Relationship. I wrote it for you if you're in an abusive relationship, and you'll know whether it's abuse or not. Do a phone advice session with me, and I'll tell you if it's abuse or not. I get many calls each week from wives and husbands who want to make sure that what they're facing is, in fact, emotional abuse. I get the background. In a few cases, it's not, and I'll say that, but in many cases, it is, and I'll confirm that is emotional abuse. They want to make sure. I don't blame them. Once you realize it is abuse, you have to act. If you didn't think it was abuse, you also didn't realize what a narcissist is. Every abuser has a strong streak of narcissism. Now, if you're benefiting from this podcast, and I hope you are, subscribe to the podcast and to my YouTube channel as well. Leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. This will help us grow this podcast and grow the YouTube channel and help more and more people. And of course, share the podcast and the YouTube videos with others. Now, my next podcast will reveal the next 5 winning responses to my contest.